The family of the American woman held hostage by Islamic State in Syria say they are heartbroken after being sent information from the militant group that she is dead.
That confirmation from Kayla Mueller's parents, Carl and Marsha Mueller, they say in a statement, "We are heartbroken to share."
We start with the US confirming that an American woman held hostage by the Islamic State group is dead. The Sunni extremists had said last week that 26-year-old Kayla Mueller was killed in a Jordanian airstrike.
That there has been a statement from her family confirming that she has died.
With the release of information about the death of Kayla Mueller, allegedly killed during coalition airstrikes, news organisations rushed to publish details of the 26-year-old humanitarian aid worker's life and death. Across the globe, glowing tributes were delivered. Her selflessness and dedication to end suffering became the stuff of hourly updates. Yet amongst the media's portrayal of Kayla Mueller's life, questions started to arise. Why, in a world full of humanitarian disasters, did she decide to go to Syria? Was it just chance or design that found her travelling to arguably one of the bloodiest civil war zones on the planet? How did this young woman, allegedly abducted in Syria, end up in the hands of one of the bloodiest regimes in history? Whilst the White House had apparently requested that news organisations not report the details of the abduction, no such policy bound the Islamic State. The question that naturally arose was, why had ISIS, an organisation that revels in propaganda videos, seemingly kept quiet over what they would consider a choice prize? On January 19, 2015, an article was published that, whilst leaving many of these questions unanswered, nevertheless gave the first clues that the media portrayal of Kayla Mueller might not be as comprehensive as it first seemed. The article, a tribute piece, was written by the International Solidarity Movement, an organisation that promotes itself as a humanitarian agency but is in fact a Palestinian front group with but one aim: the delegitimisation and ultimate destruction of Israel. A brief review of the International Solidarity Movement's history paints a vastly different aspect to the humanitarian face it presents to the world. Whilst the ISM proclaims its commitment to humanitarian values and the principles of non-violence, it nonetheless endorses the Palestinians' right to use armed resistance. It was the ISM that on Monday the 24th of October 1995 broke through Israeli security cordons to render aid to PLO members who'd laid siege to the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. The actions of the ISM in delivering food, water and ammunition allowed the siege to continue far longer than would have otherwise been possible. More recently, the ISM was heavily involved in the support and organisation of the Gaza Flotilla, which saw Israeli Marines attacked, bludgeoned and stabbed, all by self-described peace activists. The co-founders of the International Solidarity Movement, Adam Shapiro and Huwaida Arath, pictured here, are both on the record making statements showing repeated support for violent extremism. The ISM has also been found to have documented ties with prescribed terror group Hamas. The organisation directs and funds a wide range of anti-Israel programs and activities, and it was the article concerning Kayla Mueller's involvement in its activities that first shed light on the media's one-dimensional portrayal of her life. Featured in the ISM article was this picture, stating that Kayla had worked for the organisation from August through to September of 2010. In the sanitised sentences the ISM so often uses for public consumption, the piece states that Kayla worked with Palestinians, non-violently resisting the confiscation and demolition of their homes and lands. So, what exactly did non-violently resisting actually entail? Featured in the article was this picture. Taken at Bil'in in August of 2010, it gives us the first real indicator of the sort of non-violent humanitarian aid Kayla was actually involved in. Notice the man on the right. He seems, as far as we can tell, to be in some distress. An excerpt from Kayla's own writing gives us some indication of what might be affecting him. I could tell a few stories about running desperately from what you pray are rubber-coated steel bullets launched from the gun tip of a reckless and frightened 18-year-old. The smell and taste of tear gas has lodged itself in the pores of my throat and the skin around my nose, mouth and eyes. Looking further into the piece begins to give us an indication that Kayla's worldview is based less on humanitarian concerns than with a highly politicised narrative of Palestinian resistance. Resistance is nestled in the cracks of the wall. Resistance flows from the minarets 5 times a day, and resistance sits quietly in jail, knowing that its time will come again. Kayla Mueller's own writings give us the first hint of what sort of humanitarian efforts she was engaged in during her period in Israel and Palestine. An effort not to deliver food or blankets to those in need, but rather to assist Palestinian resistance. The same resistance movement that finds common cause with the likes of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. To engage in running confrontations with Israeli security forces and to promote a narrative of Israeli oppression. Palestinian resistance would be her battle, and the village of Bil'in would be her battleground. Bil'in is a small nondescript town whose only claim to fame is that it's been chosen by the activists of the ISM as ground zero in their propaganda war against the State of Israel. The reason for its choosing was simple. The village lies in close proximity to the security wall the Israeli government was constructing to halt the flow of terrorists into its borders. Every Friday, the same piece of political theatre is played out. A delegation consisting of local residents, Hamas officials, and ISM volunteers sets out from the village to the Israeli checkpoint. The rules, even if unstated, are understood by both sides. Protests are allowed to take place as long as they remain peaceful and no attempt is made to breach the security perimeter. The ISM, however, have learned long ago that peaceful protests do not make world headlines, so again and again, each Friday afternoon, the same farce takes place. Media spokesmen are filmed making carefully scripted statements about freedom and oppression.
Russia wants peace, peace with justice. They want to live in their homes.
Talking points are delivered and dutifully recorded by supposed members of the press, but who in actuality are also members of the ISM. With the formalities over, the real business of the afternoon gets underway.
Allah Akbar!
The protesters know to a fine degree of certainty exactly when the Israelis will respond to their provocations, and as such tailor their actions to get the response the ISM camera crews are waiting for.
Illegal protest. If you go any closer to the fence, you might get hurt.
Friday, the Palestinians say it is a non-violent protest, but as you can probably see from my eyes,
Once suitable footage has been obtained, the protesters retire back to the village to celebrate another day of delegitimising Israel and a job well done. Due to the efforts of organisations like the ISM to distort the truth and manufacture continuous confrontation, Bil'in has become a byword for supposed Israeli oppression. A battle cry that Kayla Mueller seemed all too ready to follow. The village of Bil'in, however, was just one part of Kayla Mueller's so-called humanitarian work that the mainstream media seemed so eager to overlook. The ISM article on Kayla Mueller also featured this photo. Widely disseminated by the media, it purports to show Kayla in a protest tent. As to the exact location of the tent and the purpose of the protest, once again, the media seemed disinclined to investigate further. To understand the significance of the photo, we have to understand the history of the area in which it was taken, a neighbourhood known as Sheikh Jarrah. Sheikh Jarrah is a small neighbourhood located in Jerusalem just north of the Old City. The population of Sheikh Jarrah, like much of Jerusalem, has always been religiously diverse. According to census figures undertaken by the Turkish Ottoman Empire that controlled the area in 1905, Sheikh Jarrah was composed of 6 districts divided into 167 Muslim families, 97 Jewish families, and 6 Christian families. The situation remained fairly stable for the next 43 years, with each group's population increasing proportionally. However, in May 1948, with the onset of the Arab-Israeli War, in which a coalition of Arab states attempted to exterminate the newly formed State of Israel, the Jordanian government seized Sheikh Jarrah from the control of the British-administered Palestinian Mandate. In fear for their lives, Jewish families were urged to flee their homes by the newly formed Israeli government and the United Nations envoys. The Israeli Defense Force, though surrounded by Jordanian forces, had managed to hold the strategically important area of Mount Scopus, allowing it to potentially shell the Dome of the Rock. And as part of the armistice agreement, Israel and Jordan agreed to United Nations oversight under the Mixed Armistice Agreement and demilitarization of the area in return for Jordan's continued occupation and Israeli access to the Jewish Hadassah Hospital and Hebrew University. One of the key points of the agreement was resumption of the normal functioning of the cultural and humanitarian institutions on Mount Scopus and free access thereto. The United Nations, under this agreement, undertook to identify areas of cultural importance to all respective parties. This is one of the UN maps that was made in collaboration with Christian, Jewish and Muslim authorities. Interestingly, the United Nations maps of Sheikh Jarrah make no mention of the suburb as an area of cultural significance to the Muslim population. It was into this vacuum, and under the eyes of the United Nations, that the Jordanians began a program of mass immigration into the area, placing Muslim families into the abandoned Jewish properties under the auspices of the Jordanian Office of Custodian of Enemy Property. In 1967, after the conclusion of the Six-Day War, Israel gained control of the area, and the Office of the Jordanian Custodian of Enemy Property was disbanded, and the Israeli government took over the administration of land ownership under the Israeli Ministry of Justice. The Israeli High Court that was asked to make a legal determination over ownership of the properties once held by the Jewish residents of Sheikh Jarrah and abandoned during the 1947 hostilities, found that whilst those Jewish families did indeed possess property rights to the land and buildings, the Palestinian families that had taken occupancy of them under the Jordanian occupation also had rights of generational tenancy and as such could not be forcibly evicted. In recompense to the Jewish families and recognition of ownership, the High Court ordered the Palestinian families must pay a nominal rent and be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the properties. It was the failure of these Palestinian families to abide by the obligations of the High Court ruling that led the Jewish owners of the properties in 1993 to file suit for payment of rental fees and removal of the Palestinian tenants. This then is the situation and background of what the ISM likes to call the eviction and settlement of Palestinian homes. The ISM immediately began systematic protests and sit-ins at these properties. To the activists of the ISM, such niceties as legal ownership couldn't be allowed to get in the way of a chance to further delegitimize Israel in the eyes of the world. Remember this photo? This is the house in question, now occupied by the family of the original Jewish owners upon the court-upheld eviction of their Palestinian tenants. And this is what Kayla Mueller's humanitarian work looks like when actually viewed in context.
What's your name? Yoav Barak. Yoav Barak. Yoav Barak. What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Two. עורך דין, איך קוראים לך? איך קוראים לך? עורך דין. איך קוראים לך? עורך דין. איך קוראים לך? עורך דין. גלעד ברעם.
The ISM daily targets and harasses the legal owners of the properties in Sheikh Jarrah, deliberately provoking the Jewish residents until Israeli police arrive and the filming of supposed unwarranted Israeli aggression can begin. Another Friday, another protest. As this video from the ISM itself makes clear, this is not a representation of mainstream outrage, but rather, just like the village of Bil'in, orchestrated theatre by the ISM and its supporters from Hamas and other Palestinian resistance organisations. Like Bil'in, the faces and format is always the same. First, the public statements laden with social justice and oppression narratives, and then the real business of the day.
5, 6, 7, 8. Israel a fascist state! Israel a fascist state! Israel a fascist state! Free, free Palestine! Occupation is a crime! Free, free Palestine! Occupation is a crime! They say apartheid! We say fight back apartheid! Fight back! Apartheid! Fight back! Apartheid! Fight back! Apartheid! Fight back!
Day, a few arrests, and more footage to depict Israel as an oppressive and illegal state. This then is the world into which Kayla Mueller's humanitarian impulses led her, into a world of false narratives and manufactured injustice, a world where the idealism of youth is turned and twisted into something darker and far more malign. It is organisations like the ISM that harness the idealism of the Kayla Muellers of the world, that target their desire for justice, and through lies and distortions twist it to their own destructive purposes and agendas. It is the ISM and groups like it that would paint the only true democracy in the Middle East, the only country that guarantees the rights of women, of gays and other minorities, as the villain, as the oppressor, as the very thing it is not. The tragedy of Kayla Mueller's death is not just that of a life cut short. It is the tragedy of a young woman who, motivated by high ideals and a desire for justice, spent her early life seeking to alleviate the suffering of others, but because of the poisonous narratives of organisations such as the ISM, went from this to this. That is the tragedy of Kayla Mueller. In the final analysis, it is a tragedy that the simple truth could have done so much to avert.